We were finally in the last stretch of the build. The 4.4 SDV8 was mounted in, secured to the subframe, and sitting solid on its new engine mounts.
Today we may give the Range Rover its first start, top-upping all fluid, checking all sensors.
We started with the sensors: camshaft, crankshaft, map sensor, coolant temperature, intake air. One by one, every connector went back in place. Next came the radiator pack. We mounted the radiator, intercooler, condenser and fan shroud back as a unit. Reconnected all coolant hoses, top, bottom, heater core return, Dega pipe, and tightened every clamp. Then we filled it with fresh coolant ready to bleed later. Each cable was routed properly and clipped in to avoid rubbing or heat exposure. No shortcuts here. The intake system went back in, along with fresh O-rings, intercooler pipes, and sensor plugs. Fuel lines were locked in, high pressure and return lines tight, no leaks. Once all mechanical components were in place, it was time to reassemble the front end. We started with the inner structure, refitting the headlight brackets and support panels that hold everything together. Next, we clipped the moldings and trims back onto the fenders and bumper. Some of the clips had to be replaced, especially the ones that broke during disassembly. With the brackets aligned, we mounted the headlights, adjusted the position for proper leveling, then moved on to the front bumper. We reinstalled the metal support panels behind the bumper, the ones that connect the radiator frame to the chassis rails. These panels serve as the mounting points for the headlight brackets, and they also keep the front end aligned during driving. After securing them with the original bolts, we checked the alignment on both sides to ensure the front frame was straight. If they're even slightly off, the bumper and headlights won't fit correctly. Then we mounted the headlight brackets, making sure they sat flush with the fender edges and locked in without stress on the plastic clips. This part is critical. These brackets not only hold the headlights but also determine the visual line of the front end. The bumper slid in with no resistance. Always a good sign that the structure underneath is straight. Bolts went in clean, everything lined up perfectly. After tightening all fasteners and checking panel gaps, the intake system went back in next, but not before a full inspection and cleanup. We cleaned the intake pipes and throttle body, removing carbon deposits and old gasket residue to ensure a tight seal. Fresh O-rings were installed on all connectors and sensor ports. These small parts are critical. One bad seal and the whole system loses pressure. Then came the intercooler pipes. We double-checked each joint for cracks or wear and made sure the inner surfaces were clean. Each pipe was pushed in firmly and clamped with high-tension bands to prevent boost leaks under load. Once the intake system was in place, we reinstalled the upper frame braces and cross supports. Finally, it was time to give the engine what it truly needs: clean fluids and brand new filters. While the oil drained, we removed the oil filter housing, located at the top of the engine between the V-banks. Using a 32mm socket, we unscrewed the cap and pulled out the old filter cartridge. The rubber O-ring on the housing was replaced with a new one, lightly oiled, and the new filter snapped into place before torquing the cap back on. The structural elements that tie the front end together. These frames add rigidity, especially under torque when the engine twists. Without them, the front end flexes and panels can misalign. Once drained, we replaced the drain plug washer, tightened it to spec, and poured in fresh 5W30 fully synthetic oil, just under 8 liters. Next, the air filters. This engine uses two, one on each side. We unclipped the airbox covers, removed the old filters, and vacuumed any debris inside the boxes. New filters went in with the airflow arrow facing the right direction, and the covers clipped back securely. It's a simple step, but it makes a big difference in performance and fuel economy. Inside, we removed the cabin filter from the passenger footwell, dropped the cover panel, slid out the old dusty filter, and replaced it with a new activated carbon filter. Battery connected, fluid stopped, ignition on.
Coolant.
First try just like that. Unbelievable. Move like Swiss watch.
Man, I didn't expect that, not this smooth. No lights, no codes, no weird sounds, just perfect. And it fired up. First try, clean, smooth, like it had never been touched. No smoke, no stutter, just a deep, steady diesel growl, the kind that hits you in the chest. I smiled, I froze, I just stood there and listened. That sound, that moment, made everything worth it. After that first start, the excitement was real. But now came the serious part, checking everything. I let the engine idle for a few minutes. No revving, just letting it settle into its rhythm. I kept an eye on the RPMs, temperature gauge, and listened carefully for knocks, ticks, or vibrations. While the engine ran, I checked underneath for leaks, oil. I inspected every hose connection, every clamp around the turbo, intercooler pipes, and especially the fuel rail. A fresh rebuild can sweat, so even the smallest leak needs attention. I made sure all the hose clamps were tight and the drain plug was sealed. The coolant reservoir cap was removed, and I used a proper 50-50 mix of OEM approved coolant and distilled water. I slowly poured coolant into the expansion tank, watching the level rise. I took my time to avoid trapping air in the system. When the tank was nearly full, I gently squeezed the upper radiator hose a few times. That helped burp out air pockets manually. With the cap still off, I started the engine and let it idle. The heater was turned on full hot, with the blower at max, to open the heater core circuit. As the engine warmed up, coolant started circulating. I kept topping up the reservoir as the level dropped. Around 80 to 90 degrees Celsius, the thermostat opened. I saw the lower radiator hose start to warm up. That's the sign coolant is flowing through the full system. Air bubbles surfaced in the tank. I waited until they stopped. Once the bubbling stopped and the level stabilized, I sealed the cap back on. Then I checked underneath for leaks, hoses, radiator seams, pump housing and heater lines. After shutoff and cool down, I rechecked the coolant level, topped off slightly if needed. The system was now sealed, bled and ready for the road. Always use approved coolant, never mix unknown types. Never rev the engine during bleeding, it can trap air. If possible, use a vacuum bleeder tool for faster, cleaner results. Everything was ready, fluids topped, engine warm, no errors. We were just minutes away from the test drive. But as the engine reached temperature, things took a turn. Coolant started gushing out, not a drip, not a leak, a full-on spill across the floor. It was coming from underneath and fast. I shut the engine off immediately and crawled under the car. There it was, the radiator drain plug, completely failing to hold pressure. The cap was done, old, brittle, cracked. Coolant was shooting out from the seal in every direction. So I had to stop everything, drain what was left, replace the faulty plug with a new one, and go through the entire refill and bleeding process again, from scratch. Not the ending I expected for that day, but that's how it goes sometimes. Lesson learned, never trust an old drain cap. After the coolant disaster, I drained the system, installed a brand new radiator drain plug, and carefully repeated the entire refill and bleeding process. With everything sealed tight, I reassembled the front end, bumper, trims, headlight alignment, all buttoned up and looking clean. At last, it was ready for a proper test drive, or so I thought. The engine ran fine, temps were stable, but the car just didn't pull like it should. The power was weak, throttle response sluggish. Something was holding it back. So I hooked up the scanner. And there it was, high DPF back pressure. The diesel particulate filter was clogged, completely choked up. No real test drive could happen until that was dealt with. Next step, full DPF cleaning, sensor checks, and a forced regeneration. Only then can we take this build out on the open road. Part 2 ends here, engines in but not yet unleashed. Part 3 is coming up, where we clean the lungs of this beast and finally stretch its legs. Part 2 ends here. The engine is installed, the systems are in place, but the soul of the car still isn't free. The DPF is clogged, the power's restrained, and before we can truly drive it, we need to let it breathe. But while the Rover waits, I'm taking a different kind of drive, more exactly, Polperro. A tiny fishing village tucked into the cliffs, where the roads are barely wide enough for one car, and the sea feels like it's just a step away from your door. No tourist buses, no noise, just narrow stone paths, salt in the air, and time moving slow. It's the kind of place that reminds you why we build, why we drive, and why sometimes we need to pause. So while the diesel V8 waits for its final breath of clean air, I'm off to clear my own head by the sea. Part 3 is coming, the real test drive, the full regeneration, and maybe the beginning of something bigger. One more fix, one final test, one hell of a drive. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in part 3.